While we're waiting for the presentation to come up, let me just introduce myself, and Jeff Collins, my partner, is here as well. Kirk Ritchey, I'm president of a startup company, Open Source Business Consulting, and the reason why we started is we felt there was a need to help facilitate and help people understand the benefits of open source, and specifically related to businesses. The experiences that my past experience for the past 17 years has been implementing enterprise solutions for national organizations or global organizations. Enterprise solutions meaning for the manufacturing, for customer relationship management, for any aspect of the enterprise in itself, the ERP solution, basically enterprise solutions. And so, coming from that perspective of enterprises, we felt that it was important for startup businesses and existing businesses to understand the value of how open source can better serve your own organization. So today, the agenda we're just going to talk about briefly is that, today's objective is really, again, every business is oriented around its own innovation. And every business has to have, there's a certain element of speed to market. And then every business has cost controls that they have to adhere to in order to maintain a level of profitability. And once that, for startups, the innovation is there, but innovation is a lifeblood of an organization even once it's established. So there's an aspect of agility that's necessary as well. So rigid systems are oftentimes very, they prevent innovation, and I've seen this myself in the IT systems that organizations put in, that they're not able to adjust to the demands of the marketplace. And so there's a need for agility, and it's a very important aspect of a business. So today what we're going to do is we're just going to answer the question, what is open source? A lot of people have an idea of what open source is. We'll go into that. Why should we use open source? What is the advantages of using open source? And again, this is all oriented around businesses. Okay, I'm not really talking about personal solutions for your home or for things of that nature, but I'm talking more from an enterprise perspective. And then also, who's using open source? What are the institutions that are out there? What are the organizations out there that are using open source? And then vendor strategies. I think this is an important aspect of it, because if any of you decide, or any of us decide, to engage in a vendor, it's important to understand where they're coming from as well. Okay, so we'll go into that a little bit. And then adoption strategy for open source and some of the things you would want to consider. And then finally, some of the leading and emerging open source solutions that are in the marketplace today. So let's get started here. So from the Wikipedia, everybody likes to refer to the Wikipedia. A definition of open source is essentially this. It's where typically the source code has been held by the by the company who's the copyright holders. In this case, open source is provided to the user under a license agreement or placed in the public domain. Many of us are aware of open source from a perspective of the public domain, where you can go out and you can download the software, and then you use it, okay? And it's usually pretty straightforward. There is a license agreement for organizations from an enterprise perspective, okay? So oftentimes it's referred to as commercial open source, okay? So you're still given the source code, and that's an important aspect of it. Being given the source code of a software is something that's important to you, because you will be able to then to adjust that software to customize it to fit your specific needs. And that's an important aspect for any business, instead of having locked in to the vendor, where the vendor itself is controlling your capabilities of using that software. Some people believe that there should be a governing institute that creates a standard, much like you find in organic, in the natural foods, how some people will put the word organic on, and if there's not an institution there that can verify, that it is actually organic. So there's a lot of people that believe that there should be an institute of standards, and there are institutes of standards within the open source industry, and that's something that's important as well, because all the solutions that are provided need to have a certain set of standards. We're living in an environment where our systems will need to interface with others very easily and very quickly. So those standards are a critical part of us being able to have that interface be able to exist efficiently. So again, you may not find that every single open source company adheres to an industry standard, but the majority of them actually do. As far as the evolution of the technology stack, you know, the way it's really began is it started in the infrastructure, open source did. It started with, you know, with Linux. And actually open source has been, there's some of the projects, the web started with a collaborative environment, and there was more of an open environment. And then out of that came what we know as today as the World Wide Web. So it's been around for a number of decades. The idea of collaboration, the idea of having an open system. But the Linux operating system is really the first one that really took seed and really grew to a point where it had massive acceptance. And then from that came the application, or the appliance, if you will, the servers. And that's where Apache and Red Hat stepped in and started developing, you know, servers for the operating system to function on. And then you had, you know, database management systems such as MySQL and Postgres and Ingress are both actually, they're 20-plus-year-old open source communities, and they started in the same community and then split up into two separate aspects of database management systems. MySQL now is owned by Oracle, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And then, of course, the languages, you know, those two. So all of this, what you see here, is all the infrastructure of a system. So you're talking about the operating system, the server, and the language that's creating the software. And the next wave of things is, you know, then the next wave where there were individual applications, okay? And, you know, the browser, Netscape was built on the premise of open source, and then Firefox, Mozilla is actually, you know, does anybody use Microsoft Firefox? So again, you're using an open source solution, you know, so it's a very common, it's a very easy, you know, very commonly found. Hotmail was the first free email. That was not open source, and then Gmail is also not open source, but some of the systems within Gmail is open source. And so, and then of course word processing, you have OpenOffice that you can download and use that, and it's very compatible to that compared to Microsoft Word Office. To continue that evolution, we now have enterprise solutions, enterprise applications, full ERP solutions, enterprise resource planning solutions, which for those of you who aren't aware of what that is, that's a full suite of applications that will run a business, meaning your financial management system, if you're manufacturing, you'll have a shop floor manufacturing capability, your materials planning processes, the MRP, materials resource planning, your production scheduling capability, your warehouse management, usually that's a bolt-on, and then other things related to manufacturing and supply chain management as well, some in there, and that's a full suite of ERP solutions. Oracle offers that. You've heard of SAP, that's an ERP solution provider, and Microsoft has a few solutions that they've purchased that they offer that are under a different name. So in the open source world, there are ERP solutions. Okay, and then CRM, customer relationship management. Many people may be aware what that is. What is the most common? You know, it's Salesforce.com, right? And that's a SaaS model, and we'll speak about them in a moment. But there are open source solutions that are pure open source, and you know, Sugar CRM and vTiger CRM. E-commerce is the solutions or software that people use to manage their web and commerce on the web. So that's a solution. Magento is a very, very good solution, and it's an open source solution. Business intelligence, which happens to do with analytics and business analytics, and allows you to understand the intricacies of your customers or of your suppliers or of your product demand. And of your own internal aspects of your business. Jaspersoft is actually the largest business intelligence company in the world, and they're an open source company. Pentaho is a startup company that that is up and coming and a lot of people are paying attention to. Enterprise integration is an aspect of an important aspect, and there's a company that started 5 years ago in France by the name of Talent. So these are open source solutions, and we'll talk more about what those are. Now, people have probably heard of cloud computing, and cloud computing is essentially software as a service. You've heard of that, SaaS, right? Where you have platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. So it's essentially that's what cloud computing is. And Eucalyptus is actually an acronym. I'm not going to tell you what the acronym is because I can't remember what it is. But that is you can create your own cloud, and it's an open source solution for that. So this is to continue to acknowledge the evolution of open source and how it's evolving into all of the aspects of typical what you would expect to find. The distribution models of open source and why use open source. Well, there's for us, for small companies, for startup companies, and for the mid-market, enterprise solutions are really expensive. They're really very difficult to procure, and so the capital expenditure rate, the initial capital expenditure is very, very high. In open source, that's been basically drastically reduced. So now you have an opportunity to introduce the opportunity to have tools for the small business and medium-sized businesses because you have a much lower capital expenditure to invest in the solutions. So that's one really great advantage of it. The risk mitigation that's there. Many of the solutions you're able to download and then test them and use them. In software proprietary, try to get the software from the proprietary user, from Oracle, and have them use it. That'll be difficult, So you have the ability to test it within your own domain, with your own people, and with your own data. And so that, again, mitigates the risk for you. Access to the source code, again, no vendor lock-in, allows you to customize the application and tweak it to fit specifically what may be necessary in order for you to do that. Instead of having to say, okay, we can use 70% of the solution and we have to create 30% workarounds or some other aspect. Some people jokingly say that the ERP solution of the world is an Excel spreadsheet. And that's really, in many cases, true, because you can't quite do everything in the solution, what is known as the enterprise solution. So what do? You export it, you put it into the Excel spreadsheet, and then you talk to someone, you have a meeting about it, and you share the Excel spreadsheet. So that's what I mean by customization. That's exactly what I mean by customization. That why is it that you have an enterprise you're trying to run efficiently, and here you have to export out of that solution and then then put it into an Excel spreadsheet and talk about it. So you lose efficiencies there. You lose automation capabilities. So access to the code is actually very critical. The developer and user community. In an open source environment, the developers and the users are in the same room. That's really important because in a proprietary environment, the developers are in headquarters or wherever they are, and they're developing for you, the user. And so in the open source community, the users are speaking with the developers. They're communicating with the developers. So the solutions are oftentimes very user friendly. And the adaptions and the quickness of improvements are often very user oriented. So it's highly competitive when it comes to the actual solution because again, you have the functionality is towards the user. So the solutions are oftentimes very profoundly, greatly improved over some of the proprietary, more commonly known solutions that we are used to hearing about. There's multiple ways of engaging in those communities: forums, wikis, blogs. There's training. There's web training through the web, or there's on-site training, and of course user conferences. So the user community is a very important aspect of an open source environment. And then the support and maintenance. It's typically traditional. Again, I'm referring to the enterprise solutions in this case. Throughout this whole presentation, I'm always talking about the business applications and the business solutions. The support and maintenance It's very traditional. It's very standard to what you would expect in an environment where what you would expect as a business user. So, but they're far less in cost. Again, much less. So that's another capital expenditure that's to our benefit. So to continue, just to summarize why we would want to use is that we have lowers our operational cost, and that's a critical aspect of running a business. You have lower on your initial cost of license procurement. You have lower support and training cost, and then you have a less risk. And as far as determining upfront, no real upfront risk in terms of investment. The innovation, the rapid time to market, and the issues related to it, going back to the community and how quickly you're able to influence it. If something is lacking in the solution that you're using, you're able to go back to that development community, and I think you would be surprised to see how quickly there could be something that could be developed that would be to your favor. So again, fast improvements and upgrades are the main reasons. So those are the two, I think, very compelling reasons why companies should consider open source. And it can coexist with proprietary systems. There's no need for, so coexistence is something that's necessary. Much of our business systems are very disparate and, have multiple systems, multiple databases, and so, coexisting is something that we would expect. Who's using it? I think the growth of the technology, we're only around like 10 years, a little over 12 years in terms of since Linux really took seed and started happening. So I don't know why this isn't working. Which way should I be pointing? Whichever way it works. Okay. All right, there we go. All right, so this is when it used to be that downloads were a measure of open source because that's how you obtained them, right? So in 2000 you had 12,000 downloads, okay? In 2008 you had 1 billion. So it's huge, huge. Now when it comes to open source is considered, each solution is considered a project, okay? So a project would be like OpenOffice, that's a project. Okay, or a project management solution in open source, that would be a single project, okay? And there are some projects that are called super projects, like Talon, the integration suite is a super project, or an ERP solution would be a super project, okay? There are 19,000 projects right now, 19,000 last year. So that's a tremendous amount of projects, okay? And many of those are super projects, okay? Such as MySQL or something of that nature. So there's a lot of innovation going on in the software world that to be aware of that would be to our advantage. That some of the companies that are using open source strategies, the federal government, NSA, NASA. NASA is a big user of open source, okay? The Department of Defense, DoD. So all of these institutions, the federal government, one thing they're doing is moving off of Oracle and going to a Postgres environment because it's 1/6 the cost. 1/6. Same functionality, same capabilities, and 1/6 the cost. So it doesn't take much to figure that one out. Web 2.0 companies, we're familiar with that term, I think. Google, Facebook, YouTube. Mozilla isn't really a company, it's a foundation, but they're the people they're the foundation in the community that's behind Firefox. So these are companies that, they're not necessarily open source themselves, but the foundation of their organization is built on open source. I'll give you an example. They have, Google runs a lot of their systems, or, they rely a lot on open systems. They have 10 million servers globally. Estimate, nobody really knows, So an estimate of 10 million servers. Now if they had to spend $1,000 on a software to put on the servers, that'd be $10 billion. So they save $10 billion by using open source. That's substantial. And that's one of the reasons why I'm talking to you today, because those are the kinds of savings that you should be thinking about. In terms of your own business scaling, your own, the capacities that you're trying to think about, open source can provide you a tremendous amount of savings by thinking about it from a strategic, thinking about open source from a strategic perspective. SaaS companies, Salesforce.com, is again a company that their operations, the day-to-day operations, they're using open source. Public companies, IBM, Virgin Air. IBM, one of the things I like about IBM is that they are strategic thinkers, and they're always strategically positioning themselves in markets. They're one of the best strategic thinking companies in the world. They started looking at open source in 2001. Just individually, it got to the strategic level in 2003, and in 2008 they made over $1 billion from open source. In 2005, I believe, they made a decision to make all of their applications and solutions available on Linux and Apache. And then they created a very strong relationship with Linux community and got involved with the Linux community in a very, very big way. And so from there, it just exploded into dealing with Red Hat and Apache and everything of that nature. Virgin Air, interesting enough, has anybody flown on Virgin America around here? Yeah, nice airlines, huh? Every single application running that airlines is open source, except for three. Three? Yeah. The screen that was in front of you, that is a proprietary system, because they couldn't get it in open source. But the entire company is run. ERP systems, the maintenance systems, the marketing and customer relationship management, all of it is open source. Every aspect of the business. And that's Virgin Air. So that's a good example of how prominent open source solutions are available to businesses today. All right, this is the evolution, and this is something I want you to make. I wanted to be the evolution of it. This is kind of like where somebody started, they built something and said, try this. They give it to their friends, and then try it. And then it grew into that the vendors began to get involved with some of the developers and started to help those developers to package that solution and create more of an offering into the marketplace. Okay, and then this is where a good example of stage 2 would be Red Hat got involved with Linux. Okay, and then they packaged Linux in a way where it was made available on servers. And then you had a stage where vendor dominant. They started dominating the solutions, and so now you have a whole realm of companies that are open source, they're VC backed, and they're basically moving into a community, into the community of open source, and they're dominating that community, and they're moving it into the marketplace, for the benefit of the market and themselves. And now what you've got, and now this is basically where we are now, is you have vendor dominant in terms of the development. So now you've got, you're using open source as a concept for developing a solution. So you're developing the community, you're encouraging the community, but it's all, again, driven from a VC-backed or a vendor that is oriented around developing that solution, but they're using open source as a means, as a business strategy to develop the solution. Some of the things that's, we don't know where it's going to go, but there's definitely the evolution of the market, if you will, in open source is something that there's going to be a lot more that will come. Cloud computing is a lot that is influencing things of that nature. The CEO of MySQL, who grew the company and MySQL is a database management system famous for being used by the Web 2.0 companies, mainly because it's a very, very good transactional database for in terms of web and what's needed on the web. The CEO of MySQL, eventually they were bought by Sun, okay, and then Sun bought Microsystems. Well, Oracle bought Sun Microsystems. So he left, and he is now the CEO of Eucalyptus. So pay attention to that. Cloud computing. So that was the company it was the open source cloud computing company. So pay attention to that company. What I wanted to, this This slide is up here for again, to show the sophistication of open source. When a vendor, when a software vendor is thinking about a business strategy, this is the area. I was at a conference in the last month or maybe the month before. I was at a conference, and this slide was up for over an hour, and we talked about this slide in all the different ways. So essentially, what a vendor thinks about, this is what they think about when they think about open source. And when it comes to developing, defining the community, they'll look at, well, how can we develop? Should the development be public or private, or a vendor? There's all the different slices and ways of developing the community itself. And then how are they going to license the community within that community? License give permission for that community to use that. And then when it comes to I think the battery in this thing is really, there we go. So when it comes to customer relationships, these are all the revenue aspects that they will consider. And each company, each vendor varies in how they will approach. And in the core of this is the IP. Is the IP of that particular solution. So this is up here only to give you a sense of the complexity, and that every time you speak to if you're speaking to an open source vendor, be aware of this, because it varies from, like Linux uses a foundation to control their IP. Someone else, the vendor itself, will control the IP. Okay, so there's different priorities that are out there, and that you as a user, as a buyer, should be aware of that and understand what you're stepping into. And this is really the reason why I wanted to bring these slides to us. But again, every single company, MySQL has a different model than Eucalyptus, and Talon has a different model than MySQL. So it just it varies greatly from company to company. Again, emerging or leading. I've already mentioned some of these. These are ERP solutions, Bravo and Compere. CRM solutions is Sugar CRM and vTiger. Business intelligence is Jaspersoft. Enterprise integration, Talon. And database integration, database management system, you have Enterprise DB. What they've done is they've basically 7 of the top 10 community leaders of the Postgres community now work for Enterprise, and they created 5 more minutes. Okay, I'm almost done. They created scripts and capabilities to migrate off of Oracle and SQL and DB2, and just again going back to that total cost of ownership issue. So cloud computing. Now an adoption strategy. The adoption strategy, as far as I'm concerned, is something that should be considered. And I'm putting all of this up here because I would prefer to think about it from the bottom up, the way the slide is designed, not from the top down. But most people, want to evaluate and educate yourself. There are many, many ways to do that, starting back at the top. There are white papers available about the solution. There are webinars, there are forums. You can download the version, and usually you have either a time limit or a version limit that you can use, but you can still use the solution to test it. You can arrange for a demo. You have to look at the difference between whether you join the community, which is oftentimes free, may often be a limited version of what you would need, or whether you would invest in the commercial use of it, and then identify the key technical people within your organization and have them align with the community and get involved with the community and become, then they become a great resource within your enterprise in relationship to that particular solution. Start with non-mission critical solutions, non-mission critical issues, maybe a subset database instead of a mission critical database. Those kinds of projects. Start from the outside, work in terms of using open source, and then evaluate it. What are your key deliverables, and within that, what's the ROI, and then use that as a way of moving forward and evaluating how to continue. But most importantly, create a strategy. Look at it from a top-down perspective, and create an open source strategy that is in line with your overall IT strategy and your business strategy. So just real quickly, who we are. We are open source business consulting. We're here to help companies understand the strategic positioning and the value of open source. We also have expertise within certain domains of what we consider to be leaders within the open source environment, open source market. So our role or our purpose is to help companies leverage the benefits of open source for their own enterprises by providing planning and plan execution strategies, and by integration. The ERP is still a very difficult suite to implement and requires some expertise to implement it. And also integration, if it's a solution that just needs to be integrated within your system, that's something we will provide as well. Open source support and maintenance, we are the first person to call, or tier 1 level of support and maintenance as far as training and upgrades. And then finally, hosting and solutioning of or cloud computing for the solution itself. What we are, our people, as far as we have experience in enterprise solutions, years of it, and we're committed to using open source solutions, so open source products. And then finally, our clients, the two primary focuses that we feel like we deliver is lowering the total cost of ownership of your IT enterprise, and providing increases in your operational efficiencies. So I thank you for your attention and your time, and if anybody has any questions, Les is pacing here, but I'd be happy, and Jeff and I would be happy to take any questions either now or afterwards, whatever you prefer. Sure. Yep. I'll be around.